Welcome to Bizemag podcast, launched by Business Strategy e-magazine and L'strategyq Advisors. Myself, Dr. Vaneeta Aggarwal, CEO and founder of these two companies. Before I start today's podcast, I humbly request all my audience to please subscribe our channel. The video link is given below this channel. So today's guest is Colin Taufer. I'll welcome Colin on our channel. It's been our pleasure to have Colin Taufer on this podcast channel. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you
I
very
will
much.
briefly I will briefly introduce Colin Taufer to my audience. Just give me a second. Colin Taufer is a researcher, writer, teacher, and he asks several questions about how to awake genius, who is genius, what is genius. Colin served as head of school for a premier private school for 16 years, following an accomplished career as a teacher. He is well practiced at speaking publicly, acting on stage, delivering conferences and seminars, and sharing his passion for education, success, and genius. He is writing a book about the characteristics of genius with co-author and self-made billionaire Bob Duggan. The book will inspire young people through the stories and lives of fellow geniuses from history, and it is to be released by year end. So, Colin, my first question about you and from you would be if you can introduce yourself to our audience in your own words and tell us a bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Colin Taufer. I've been in education probably almost 30 years now. And in the last couple of years, I became friends with Bob Duggan, who you mentioned. He is a businessman, self-made billionaire businessman, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And he has had a passion for genius, and we got to talking with one another, and we decided it would be worthwhile to spread the message of genius as he sees it, as some of the research he's done, as some of the research I've done, especially as it pertains to the work he did. He's a serial entrepreneur, which means he's run many businesses, many of them very successful businesses. One of his most successful businesses was a company called Pharmacyclics, which he ran in the let's see, from 2009 to 2015, I believe it was. And it was a very successful company. When he came in, it was struggling. And by the time he was done, he turned it around to one of the greatest success stories ever. And much of the success he attributes to pushing into the culture of the company this concept of genius. And that's what I'll get into more details of it, but it was his great successes with teaching genius to his staff, to his employees, to his team that turned around his company and made it, in fact, one of the biggest turnarounds ever. For example, when he took on the company, it was trading, I think, 57 cents a share. We're talking penny stock world. And by the time he was finished, it was acquired by a larger company and was selling at around $260 a share. So he did a phenomenal turnaround. And again, many of the employees, all the employees, can point to the success from his leadership and his firm belief in making sure everyone involved in the project could be a genius. So I came along, we need to spread this message to the world. He has done his genius message into the corporate world, corporate training, etc. And I said, you know what? I think we need to also deliver this message to young children, to young adults, to the leaders of tomorrow. And the best way to do that was be in a nice book. So I've had worked with him over the last year or so. We've worked together on finding subjects to write about, people to write about, geniuses of the past who exemplified the characteristics of a genius and to tell their stories. And the big message is simple. The big message is that we believe you can be a genius. So there you go.
Right, right. So how did your career as a teacher and educator, help you write this book? Are you sharing some
Oh
of your
boy.
experiences?
Well,
Yeah.
yes. Okay. Well, I've was in education long enough. I began as a tutor and then started working in the classroom and then was an administrator and then worked, being coaching sports. Basically, if you're in education long enough, you probably end up doing everything in the school world. And that was me. And by the time I was done, the last half of my career, I ended up running a private school here in Florida, which is where I live. And you get to know, obviously you get to know children very well, students very well, families very well, teachers very well, and the reason to be a teacher, the reason to be an educator is to get to know the students, work with them, find out what their best attributes are and make them better, find out what their weaknesses are and make them better. And by coincidence, perhaps I came across this same article that my now co-author Bob is familiar with that spoke of these genius characteristics. So probably like the last 10 or so years as an educator, I started using these very same genius principles in the school. And it really is an empowering process to have anybody, whether they're a child or a teacher or an adult, to learn these basic characteristics, you know, and it just makes teaching more fun, makes the students do better, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I've been in education for a long time, love working with children, love working with families, and it's been a really nice match working with Bob for the same reason.
Mm-hmm. And so tell us something about the book. How is it written? What is the, flow chart? What is the, say, genre of the book? How you have uh, written about genius? Are you mentioning some characters of the genius, or like what it is all about? How you have put it?
Yeah, I'll summarize it very well. So the whole book is based on a researcher, a psychological researcher by the name of Dr. Alfred Barrios. And he did a research and writing on genius. And what he said, and I'll just read exactly what he wrote, he said that most people have the mistaken idea that geniuses are born, not made. But if you look at the lives of the world's greatest geniuses, you discover that they all had 24 personality traits in common. These are traits that anyone can develop. It makes no difference how old you are, how much education you have, or what you have accomplished to date. Adopting these personality characteristics enables you to operate on a genius level. So that was at the core of what Dr. Barrios researched and figured out. So he dug into it and basically isolated these 24 characteristics of a genius. And the concept of the book is quite simple. As Dr. Barrios said, if you look at the lives of the greatest geniuses, they had these traits. Well, with Bob and I over the last year have been looking into geniuses, some famous geniuses, some not so famous geniuses. And if you look around, you find, yes, they all have these characteristics. For example, you start with these 24 characteristics are just natural qualities that everyone has, drive, courage, persuasion, enthusiasm, etc. And, one of the nice things that happened when we were researching these people of the past, some of the more common ones, the well-known ones, Helen Keller, for example, is a well-known person of the past who, when you start examining her life, obviously she started out with circumstances that are, difficult to say the least. She, through the course of her life, with enthusiasm, with drive, with curiosity, with the willingness to acquire knowledge, built herself up into a well-known genius. So when you examine her life, you find out, you know what, she wasn't born a genius. She worked her way into becoming a genius, again, by just using these traits little by little, and becoming better at it. Now, in the course of writing the book, I also I wanted to corroborate what Dr. Barrios had to say about geniushood, and did much of my research on my own. Let me grab a book here. So Dr. Barrios wrote the book, or did his research, I believe, in the early 80s. And fast forward to today, especially within the last 10 years, and a great deal of research has been done on genius. One of the best books I've researched is by this author, The Genius in All of Us, which tells a very similar story. And, genetics, people often assume, either you're born with supernatural qualities or you're a superhero. And if you don't have those qualities, you're not going to be a genius. Well, genetic research of the last 10 to 20 years has started to figure out that no, your genes are not your fate. Put another way, let's see. For example, in here we have this book from Scientific American. Same thing. It's very simple. Within there, it talks about, and this is a direct quote, students who believe their intelligence can grow tend to learn more, acquire deeper knowledge, and do better. So again, we kind of do away with this idea that either you're born a genius or not a genius, and you can construct, you can build yourself up. And that's really what Dr. Barrios's whole idea was, that again, if you examine these 24 characteristics, you can figure out that everyone has them and everyone can develop them further. This book was one of the better ones I read. In one simple sentence, I think this author, David Schenck, did a very good job saying the genius in all of us is our built-in ability to improve ourselves and our world. So we wrote this book saying, okay, well, here are these 24 characteristics. We can easily find 24 people from the past who have exemplified them. And every one of them, you can be inspired by them, learn by them. And one for one, you find out, they weren't born geniuses. They made themselves into geniuses. One of the most commonly, often when you talk about geniuses, people will say, well, Leonardo da Vinci, of course. Yes, Leonardo da Vinci, of course, was a genius. However, even if you read the biographies about da Vinci, there was one of the better ones written by Walter Isaacson. And inside that book, one of the things Isaacson discovered, just like everybody, he wasn't born into a geniushood. And again, a direct quote, the biographer said, Leonardo's genius was a human one. It was wrought by his own will and ambition. It was based on skills we can aspire to improve ourselves. So again, it all just sort of supports what Dr. Barrios said in the first place, that if you can, you can develop these characteristics. And the book we're writing, again, it's made for young leaders of tomorrow. It just points out that you have within you to be a genius, and are some simple ways to build up that genius. And the nice thing about the co-author Bob Duggan, his successes of using it in the work world has proven it to be not just more than just make you feel better. It actually gets good results.
True. So Bob, when I was listening to you,
Yes.
one thought was coming in, particularly in case of Vinci. Sometimes people do have traits of genius, but they do not get that conducive environment where that genius can come out and show itself to the world. So the ones who are reputed ones or the known ones are those who got some way, in some manner, some conducive environment where world came to know about their genius and they were able to explore that particular trait. But many of such talents who are born with genius, their genius is somehow suppressed by the environment around. Don't you think so?
Exactly right. I think, yeah. Um, I've read studies that support that same thing. You want to have an environment which challenges you in a way to bring to lift yourself, to push yourself, to lift yourself up into, you know, there's another kind of a famous author by the name of Carol Dweck, and she wrote a book called Mindset, which is pretty much that exact same message. You know, there's, in her view, there's two types of people. There's the people who have a fixed mindset. You know, they believe their abilities are fixed and will never change. And there's a group of people that she calls have the growth mindset, which those who believe that abilities can be developed. You surround yourself with people with a fixed mindset, well, you're gonna probably not have the same belief in your own growth. Surround yourself with a growth mindset, and you'll get the opposite effect. It's funny, you often will talk when you ask people about genius and what it is. It's been my experience. They're it's easy for them to say, "Oh yeah, I know that person's a genius. I know that person's a genius." But me, you know, maybe not. So so it's an interesting when you start talking to them and you realize, you know what, they have done courageous things in their life. They have been optimistic in their life. You know, they have the ability to persuade people. And again, these are just natural. Everyone has these qualities. So it's a matter of what if you could identify what they are and say, you know what, I can do that better. So, you know, inch by inch, level by level, you can work yourself up and have more and more successes with being a genius. And again, that's the whole point of the book. The website we're creating for our book is called A Genius World. And that's very
Mhm.
simple. We believe that the world can be a more genius place. If everyone was a little more curious, everyone was a little more imaginative, everyone was a little more, even a bit more sense of humor, they'd be a little more genius, which would make their themselves a little more genius, their families more genius. They could do things in their community. And all of this is about idealism. You know, if you the true genius will leave their mark on the world, having done something not just for themselves, but for the betterment of mankind, for humankind, for the earth. And again, that's the simple message we have. And you know, what does that mean to us? Well, whatever you think a better world will be, that's what we want to help with.
Great. So I think it is going to be a great
Yeah,
book to read, and there would be great resources as well for parents also to understand that their child can be a genius if they just, let him be. Uh, and if they are able to counsel or take help of a counselor to understand what are the traits that can make that child genius and develop those traits further. So are you planning to open certain kinds of coaching center or a person or genius development center, if I say, where you can, because as an educator I understand you are able to find traits in your students and understand, and if you have proper techniques where these traits can be developed to help the student to close the genius inch by inch or step by step.
exactly. And so much of it is really just the mindset. Um, last 2 weeks ago, for the last 2 weeks, I work with a humanitarian group, and we do projects in West Africa. You know, so um, I've been back there many times as an educator to work on literacy projects and leadership projects. And I was back there again 2 weeks ago. And I thought, now that I am working with Genius also, I want to see how, when we start talking about literacy, if we can also introduce Genius to the same people we're working with. So we got in front of a number of groups of, again, uh, uh, usually college students and young students, and we gave presentations on Genius. And one for one, they come away with this new mindset that, I can be a genius, I can develop better, I can do greater things. And really, that's the whole point of it. If we can make everyone believe, I am a little more genius, I can do greater things, I can push myself up. And like you said, the environment they are part of is key to it. But that's also, I suppose, part of being a genius. You to lift yourself, you have to lift others around you, and that's part of that's part of being a genius. So again, you'll see when the book comes out this fall, we tried to find one of the best illustrators possible, and we
Mm-hmm.
did. His work, once you see his work, recognize his work from you know some of the more well-known Disney films and children's films of the last 20 years, because
Mm-hmm.
he's exceptional at what he does, and we really wanted to find something to capture the, you know, and all these characters we studied and wrote about really can capture um, their humanity and their geniuses within them, you know. um, yeah, so the book is, we're very excited about the book, and we have also some films coming out as well that'll support, you know, short little like public service announcement type films for each one of the characteristics. So that's also going to bolster this, you know, this message that the world can be more genius.
Great. So all the best wishes to you, Colin, for your upcoming book. And this is great to know. Yes, some sort of animation film supporting the cause of the book would be a great idea to make it popular among the students, also among the young kids or the young teens. Animation is always a good way of attracting. And as you told, you have
Yes,
taken services of best of the illustrators. So I think that is going to make your
yes.
book pretty interesting and attractive also. And thank you so much.
Thank you.